very much, everyone, for joining this webinar today. Good morning here in the UK. We're crossing a lot of time zones, so good evening in Australia. We have one of our panelists in Australia, and wherever you are in the world. So welcome to this event from the Council on Anti-Illegal Betting and Related Financial Crime, which is part of the Asian Racing Federation. My name is Martin Perbrick. I chair the ARF Council, and it's a pleasure to moderate this discussion today. So just to give you a quick reminder for those of you who don't know us, what we are and who we are, the ARF Council is a think tank. It's under the Asian Racing Federation. The Asian Racing Federation itself is a regional federation of 28 national racing authorities and racing-related organizations, quite diverse in the nature of the organizations, and geographically it spreads across Asia, Oceania, Africa, and the Middle East. So a large organization and diverse. The ARF itself aims to foster goodwill and mutual understanding amongst its members to promote horse racing, integrity and prestige of the sport. And most importantly, I think one of its aims to exchange ideas and information connected with horse racing as a sport. And that's part of our role as a think tank for the Asian Racing Federation. So the ARF Council, established in 2017, it's a small group of experts. It's not a group of organizations, but of expert people. So we currently have 24 members, 24 people. They come from a very diverse range of organizations, from horse racing, other sports, mostly sports integrity backgrounds. Interpol, we have Claudio here today, some law enforcement, United Nations, and academia. We have half a dozen university academics on the council. Very proud to have them as colleagues. So the purpose of the ARF Council is really to foster international collaboration in horse racing and sports with regulators, government policymakers, intergovernmental organizations to better combat the threat of illegal betting and related financial crime. And obviously we see illegal betting as a very wide subject area, and we relate it to integrity in sports and some of the other areas it impacts. So today's webinar, we have three of the council members, three of the most distinguished council members, I would say. And if I could just quickly introduce them and give a little bit about their background. Dr. John Langdale is an expert on transnational crime and financial crime. He's written in the past several years about what has been termed the Vancouver model, which describes complex cross-border criminal enterprises. He has significant insight into international money laundering, transnational organized crime, and the related illegal betting and gambling that we talk about and write about. John is an honorary research fellow with the Department of Security Studies and Criminology at Macquarie University in Sydney. So thank you for taking the time, John. I know it's late in your evening, so I hope you have a nice relaxing drink with you. Secondly, we have Claudio Marinelli, who is with Interpol, their Financial Crimes and Anti-Corruption Center. Claudio is a law enforcement officer originally from the Italian Economic and Financial Police, the Guardia di Finanza, and currently coordinating the anti-money laundering and asset recovery team within its operations department within Interpol. It's been instrumental in leading the work of the Interpol Match Fixing Task Force, which I think most of you from this sports integrity background who are joining will know is one of the leading thought leadership and coordinators of sports integrity globally, and has positioned itself, I think, largely thanks to Claudio's efforts with his colleagues in the past several years. And last but not least, Luca Esposito, General Secretary of United Lotteries for Integrity in Sport, which some of you may know as its former name, the Global Lottery Monitoring System, which I think has established itself as one of the most credible and effective sports integrity monitoring systems globally. Luca is also the Executive Director of the World Lottery Association, which is an association of legal licensed lottery and betting operators around the world, which obviously indicates his commitment and his colleagues' commitment to legality in this area. Luca has extensive knowledge and experience of technology in betting, comes from an IT background, and I think that's especially important these days with the nature of technology use in betting on sports and how that impacts integrity. So we're very pleased to have Luca as a member of the council. On the sidelines, I'd just also like to point out Doug Robinson, Deputy Chair of the ARF Council, and James Porteous, Head of Research at the Council. So they'll be stepping in later to answer any questions as well, if necessary. So our focus today really is on organised crime in relating to this area of illegal betting and gambling, and how the legal betting sector also deals with this issue, which is more Luca's area. So just to remind attendees, this is the Zoom webinar platform, so your videos and microphones can't be heard or displayed, and we can only see the panelists today. However, we do want to hear from you. So please, could you put your questions in Zoom chat or Zoom Q&A, and then we'll come to them later on. Any questions or comments, please shoot them up at any time during discussion, and we will make time to come to them in due course. So I'd just like to kick off with some introductory remarks from each of the panelists, and perhaps we can start with John. So we're really focusing mostly on the most recent articles in the ARF Council Bulletin. And John, you wrote in the last bulletin a fascinating article about transnational crime, money laundering, and illegal online betting in Southeast Asia, which I think is really your area of expertise. About the growth of transnational crime in the Mekong region, and also this displacement of crime from China, which is something I think we're all starting to realize, and our friends at Interpol are writing about this at the moment, as Claudio has pointed out in our earlier discussion about people trafficking. So perhaps could you give us some background on the subject matter in the article, the context of the situation, and how that situation of displacement of organized crime may relate to illegal betting, illegal gambling in Asia as well, and its growth.
Sure. Thank you. Well, essentially, the displacement of transnational crime from China has been going on for some time. And if you're interested in the background, the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime has put out a report in 2019 and it put out supplementary reports on synthetic drugs and opium in this year, in fact. So what we've seen is displacement out of China in methamphetamines, other illegal drugs, wildlife trafficking, and probably down the track some more areas. One that comes to my mind is counterfeit goods, likely to grow in the future. But I'd like to think of the transnational crime and money laundering in this region as an integrated system, so that change one part of the system and you've got flow-on impacts into the rest of the system. So we don't really understand the way in which the linkages occur, but we can see that, changes, China crackdown on crime within China is leading to flow-on impacts into the weak, particularly the weak countries in the Mekong. Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar are the three ones that keep coming up again and again, and particularly Myanmar, but Laos and Cambodia are definite cabs off the rank. We also see in the money laundering area, because if you have the growth of transnational crime, you've got huge amounts of money to launder. Some of that is laundered within the region, like in the Mekong region. Some of it's laundered in other countries like Australia or US or elsewhere. But casinos are used heavily. There's something like 350 legal casinos, probably more in the Southeast Asian region, and a much larger number probably of illegal online casinos. Many of these casinos are involved in laundering the proceeds of transnational crime, although they're also serving the needs of the Chinese gambling market and local gambling markets as well. So what you've also had is the growth of illegal online betting in the Mekong region in particular. And in Martin, in fact, you have written in the previous bulletin article about the footloose online betting centres, either footloose within the country, so that effectively, as law enforcement moves to close one down, they move to another location and just set up again, so that they're easily movable. And then you wrote about the second shift is the displacement effect, where online betting groups move operations from, say, the Philippines to Cambodia and then on to Myanmar, so that you can have both footloose online betting centres moving around within countries, within Cambodia, for example, or they're shifting from country to country as the pressure moves on. So that in the online betting area, you've got a number of displacement effects taking place within the whole region. The area I'd like to focus on probably is the special economic zones, or SEZs, or SEZs in the American context. There are two perspectives on the SEZs. One is you for and against, I suppose. The proponents of SEZs in Southeast Asia say that they provide economic development, less government red tape. Examples in the there are many examples in the Asia Pacific region worldwide of successful ones. I mean, Shenzhen in Guangdong province is probably the most successful growth from a fishing village in the 50s to a city of 20 plus, 30 plus million today. So, massive technology development in Shenzhen, and a number of others within China as well, and other countries. Conversely, you've got SEZs that are hubs for transnational crime, and certainly, we'll be focusing on the SEZs in the Mekong region, places like the King's Romans Casino in the Golden Triangle in Laos. I'll come back to that, but I refer to that as a one-stop shop for transnational crime. Shui Koko in Kayin State in Myanmar, or Yatai New City, it's called by a number of different names. And Sihanoukville, to some extent, can be seen as a SEZ as well. These SEZs have diverse transnational crime activities. They're centres of online betting, often with forced labour, and there's been quite a lot of publicity in recent years about them effectively imprisoning their labour force behind barbed wire and protected by internal security groups. So what's happened is that the state, in other words, the Laotian state or the Cambodian state, has ceded security control within the SEZ to in King's Romans to the Jiaowai criminal group. In Yatai New City, there's another group that runs the place. So effectively, no state control over the security apparatus in those places. As a result, you can have online betting, online scam centres, developing at a rapid rate. If I come back to the King's Romans, which is an interesting case study of a SEZ in a one-stop shop in transnational crime, the Americans blacklisted. US Treasury blacklisted in 2018, I think, and it hasn't stopped the growth of the centre. It's been growing. It's got illegal drug trafficking, wildlife trafficking, underage prostitution, money laundering, and a variety of other criminal activities, all basically under the one roof, if you like. And growth has been rapid. You've got hotel development. In fact, the United Wa State Army has an 8-story hotel, I gather, in that. So, Jiaowai has had links back to the UWSA in the past, and it has continued to those. I think the thing about the King's Romans Casino, the economists refer to economies of scale and economies of scope, and Jiaowai has basically been developing economies of scale in the sense that he's got larger size casino, larger size operations. He's developing a new airport, or has developed a new airport to bring additional Chinese gamblers. And he's also developing economies of scope. That means that you can enhance the attractiveness of the casino by having a variety of complementary activities. You can have illegal drugs, prostitutes, wildlife to be consumed, and he's done that very effectively. So essentially, and particularly with the online side, he's been able to develop the online during the COVID-19 epidemic, and he can switch from either the online or the physical casino, depending on the ability of the gamblers to travel. So this has been a major advantage for an outfit like the Jiaowai group. what I just finally talk about the implications for governments and from the transnational crime, online betting and gambling, the major policy issues here. And the big one I think is important is the overspill of crime from the Mekong region into surrounding countries, particularly Thailand is a major problem. Of course, China's worried about online betting because it's facilitating capital flight, and it's basically been trying to ban online betting by Chinese citizens in these countries. But it's very difficult for China to do this because of sovereignty issues. But the spillover effects for China, for Thailand are very important. If you've been following the recent events in the press, quite a major scandal has arisen in Thailand with illegal drugs being trafficked in from Myanmar, illegal migration of Chinese citizens into the country, property developments being done through fake citizens, and associated money laundering. So essentially, you've got a growth of diverse range of transnational crime taking place in Thailand. And Thailand is important because it's a significantly sized ASEAN economy. Laos, Cambodia are tiny, and Myanmar's pretty small too, apart from the illegal side. Thailand's big. So Thailand actually means a lot for the rest of the ASEAN countries and for the rest of the world. So this spillover effect of transnational crime, whether it be illegal drugs, illegal betting, illegal migration, is important, not just for the ASEAN countries, but for Australia and other countries in the region. And it's important for China as well. So I don't think there are any winners out of this, apart from the criminals, of course. And it's something that we really need much more discussion regionally from all of the countries involved, China, ASEAN, Australia, and elsewhere, to be discussing these sorts of problems because they're affecting all of us. So I think I'll leave it there at the moment, and perhaps we can come back to. There's lots of other issues that we could talk about, but that's probably a good point to leave it there.
John, thank you very much. It's a very good introduction. I mean, obviously we're starting off with the organised crime situation today, which I think is critical because this issue of illegal betting on sports and illegal gambling and the globalization of it is a massive organised crime issue, as we're increasingly seeing in Asia, which I think is still the epicenter of this. And I think you set the scene nicely because, as you've said, there's this increasingly lawless zone around the Mekong, which is causing huge problems. And in fact, without giving too much away, James, our head of research, is preparing to publish a report on this issue of illegal betting relating to people trafficking and the revenue streams relating to that. So I think that'll follow on from what you've just introduced. So perhaps if we can now just get on to how law enforcement sees this, and very grateful for having Claudio from Interpol for taking the time here. Obviously, Claudio is a member of the ARF Council as well, so he's very much part of this set of discussions we've had for the past few years on the nature of illegal betting, and especially for us to learn from what Interpol are doing and help to publicize more of their work, especially in regard to Operation Soga. And I think, Claudio, that's what we're going to ask you to talk a little bit about today. So you wrote in the last ARF Council bulletin about the Interpol coordination of Operation Soga, which was obviously was during the last World Cup in Qatar, which seems a long time ago now, watching those games and the excitement of the final. Perhaps if you can just tell us more about Operation Soga, what it involves, the organized crime aspects of it, the scale of the organized crime, if you can, the sports anti-corruption and financial crimes that are involved as well, and what impact you think this is having on betting on sports. Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you, Martin. Indeed, as law enforcement, we have always had in the last years a close look at that markets. And Operation Soga is one of the initiatives that Interpol is running since 27 now, with nine wave of operations set up, mainly in conjunction with the big sporting events, and the World Cup is one of that, of course. The main difference from the past was that we tried to put this as a global operation, because in the past this operation was mainly focused on the Asian region, as Asian was considered, and it is considered, still considered as a main place where illegal betting is operations are run. But through the intermediation, let's say in this way, through the intermediation of the Interpol Match Fixing Task Force and all the investigative units that are associated with us, we try to export the model broadly, because the first signals of integrity in sport issues can be traced in countries, and then we need to follow these signs until the very first signs are exploited through the betting sector, to the illegal betting market. During the World Cup last year, we worked a long couple of months, 2-3 months, since the start of the pre-operation phase, and then the tactical phase, and through the real operation phase in 19 countries. So 19 countries joined this effort, and the coordination you mentioned at the beginning is the key in all of this, because criminals very often take advantage of this coordination between law enforcement globally. So as soon as we can put coordination around efforts made in different countries and jurisdictions, we can succeed to achieve goals and results. And this has been the case in this phase of the Operation Soga, but also in the previous one. So the point of organized crime exploiting this emerged in many sources we have received over the years. Still, illegal gambling is considered as a main driver for integrity in sport issues, and mainly match fixing. Of course, all criminals have an interest of making money due to their activities, and the huge amount of money and interest that are exposed within the sport industry offer them a critic and a very interesting platform to exploit. We should move from the traditional way to see sports as an environment of just fun. This is no longer the case. Sport is an industry nowadays, is a clear industry which is receiving a lot of money, which is moving a lot of money, where money is the key. And of course, criminals are interested in taking advantage of this environment due to the money that are involved. And illegal betting, of course, is an incredible market. We heard everyday figures related to the exposition of the market in terms of how much money are generated through it. And we always see, but this is not figures that are exposed. These are figures that came out from real analysis here and there. So from our side, what we have seen during the operation is that there has been a very huge use of technology. And this is a trend that is increasing over the years, but not just during the pandemic period, but also since before. The use of technologies is helping a lot criminals, and they are becoming more and more skilled in this direction, but also using the skills that are eventually available in the criminal worlds in other criminal areas. We've seen organized crime group previously working in attacking ATMs. So applying, just to name an example, attacking ATMs, so applying their technical and the technical skills, now working in the domain of illegal betting. We have seen automatic boot system automatic machine, betting machine used. We have seen capturing of protected signal of information, protected information, transmission of video information is being intercepted and exploited, taking advantage of the gap which is required to transfer this video from different parts in the world. So the skills applied by criminals have been incredibly increasing over the last year. Of course, this is a threat, and but the important from the perspective of Interpol to expose all these threats to the whole law enforcement community is there, and we are there for that. So basically, we are exposing all the elements we are able to capture from the cases that are shared with us for the benefit of law enforcement community worldwide. In relation to Operation Soga, I want also to mention that this is this year, the last year wave all broad action from Interpol aimed at increasing the security measures around the World Cup. As you know, Interpol has worked closely with Qatar in order to put the best efforts in order to increase the security measures. And integrity is being considered part of this security measure, because you cannot have a secure competition if you don't have a competition which is clearly part of an integrity system. Of course, behind all these efforts has been set up also the Operation Soga. We've been working closely with the organizers of the competition, with the country hosting the competition, and as I told you, with the number of countries globally. So countries from South America, Africa, and Europe, as well as Asia and Australia joined the operation. And the main results have been arrests, seizures, but also a lot of intelligence has been captured and are continuously available for us. And this is very important, because when we capture intelligence, it's not that these intelligence are just there for this wave of the operation. This remains there, and we can establish links even in the future. So it's very important for us the countries share information on the cases that they have developed, and we may be able in the future to link these cases and the entities that have been traced to other cases to continue looking after, the ones who are committing the crime, but also in the way that we can provide new inputs to member countries. Another point I wanted to mention here is that the preventing function of this global operation cannot be underestimated. We have seen even criminal networks that have been much more careful due to the fact that the global community, not just law enforcement, but also law enforcement working with the sports and governmental institutions, has come together to work around this issue. This has given criminal networks an important sign that they have to be very, very careful when they commit crimes. So the preventive function of this global operation cannot be underestimated. And also sometimes we have seen in countries that all these operations are set up based on license, where a system allows betting to be run in the country, and very often a lot of administrative sanctions have been given to the illegal operators in the countries. So also this is not a point to be underestimated, because very often administrative sanctions are effective in the same way as criminal sanctions, because these affect the finances that the criminals put into the market. And sometimes we have been able also to recover some of the assets and the finances that have been exposed through the system and through the market is a very important point for us to consider, because as soon as you deprive criminals from their criminal finances, this gives them a real hard hit, and this is our role here, to try to disrupt all the finances that are involved and to kick really the criminals in their pocket.
Claudio, thank you very much. While we have you on, perhaps I can also ask you, what's next for Operation Soga? Because I understand I think it's an annual operation coordinated by Interpol, not obviously coinciding only with the World Cup. So do you know when is the next Soga? And also perhaps in relation to that, obviously I think we tend to associate Operation Soga with football, largely because it coincides with the World Cup when that's run. But do you see Operation Soga in the football in the future as being relevant to other sports at times and other major sports competitions?
I would say that it may be relevant to organize likely a similar operation around other competitions, global competition that maybe are exposed more in specific regions and specific sports, other sports. Of course, football attracts a lot of interest. For the next phase of operation is not yet defined where and when it will be. But likely will be maybe around another big competition in the future. But I agree with you, football not to be considered the only big competition. And also I want to mention that even without a Soga ongoing, we are not stopping working around big sports competition. There is the Women World Cup coming, football Women World Cup coming, and this not means that Interpol is not working around this as well. We have been working around cricket competitions and other big competitions as well, and we have the rugby coming to France very soon, as well as the next Olympic Games, Summer Olympic Games coming up to France again next year. So a lot of work to do behind.
Well, exactly. And you just mentioned cricket. I mean, obviously the scale of illegal betting markets in South Asia is huge, which you've seen especially with some of the advertising in the past year on competitions. Claudio, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to you in due course, if that's okay. Perhaps we can switch over to a slightly different, well, a very different perspective now, I think, from the legal market. And Luca from World Lottery Association. So Luca, you wrote in the last bulletin about how the World Lottery Association sees illegal betting, and also, your work with United Lotteries for Integrity in Sport. So perhaps you can tell us more about how do your members and you, as a leader of this organization, see the issue of illegal betting, some of the issues that it involves, and what do you and your colleagues do just to educate some of our audience who haven't seen much of your work? What do you do to help maintain sports integrity in relation to these threats from illegal betting? Over to you, Luca.
Thank you, Martin, and thanks for the question, which allows me really to explain a little bit what we do at the WLA and at ULIS as well. And Claudio was just mentioning the monitoring of the various major events, so I will talk also about that. But first, let me say that the topic of illegal betting, it's really important for our members, because illegal operators threaten the whole industry reputation. They threaten business operation and customers who play online, but they can also have an impact on many stakeholders. It was mentioned before, on global sports betting ecosystem, which includes athletes, clubs, federation, other sports organization, and even the fans at the end are affected by that. You mentioned at the beginning in the presentation of the introduction, the importance of technology, and we have seen that over the past 5 years with the technology, increase of technology use, and also the global pandemic as well, which was an accelerator as well, there has been a boom in online betting. Unfortunately, also on the legal side. because the legal operators have benefited from that, but illegal as well. And we know that it's much harder to stop the proliferation of illegal betting sites. They are very easy to set up and harder to track, and given the sheer number of them worldwide. Our members are very concerned for their players because at the World Lottery Association, player protection and know your player, it's at the heart of what we do. It's really important that we offer and we propose an offer which is at the same time responsible and reasonable for the players and fun, but it doesn't have to go beyond those thresholds, which unfortunately it is what happens with the legal side, where really there is most of the cases there is no real player protection in place. Also, those illegal operators, as we discussed before, avoid taxes, and this represents also a great loss of money for our industry. And if we look at the 2022 edition of our WLA compendium, overall, the lottery industry and sports betting operator raised a little bit more than 93 billion for good US dollar and for good causes, which is really definitely a great achievement. But unfortunately, estimates for the amount raised by legal operators greatly outstrips this, which is really the bad, side of the medal. Also, our members are concerned with the legal betting sites, which offer and are also linked to illicit activities. Where before Prof. John was discussing about the issues with money laundering as well. So there are those illegal activities that allow us to launder money, that there is no player protection, there is no check who is placing the bet, and to whom is paid as well the result of a winning bet, which really allows to an easy way to fundamentally launder money or to clean money in a very easy way. So, but to answer also your question is, because this was mainly about the concerns that we see in our industry, is to say, what we do as a part of our community. So we are a global organization which represents state-authorized lotteries and licensed betting operators around the world. We have more than 150 members as a part of the association. And as such, the WLA is very well suited to take a leading role in the fight against illegal betting. So we aim to uphold the highest standards of ethics for our industry, and really to help our members to raise money for good causes in a responsible way. This is quite important. We have always advocated for regulated lotteries and betting market. So we work to support our members in their regulatory framework and of their respective jurisdiction. As such, we believe that a gaming operator must possess a license in the jurisdiction where the player is located. This is part of our Code of Conduct, Article 2, and our Code of Conduct was written in 1999. And the beauty of this is that this perfectly in line with the definition of illegal betting provided by the Council of Europe, the Magellan Convention framework for addressing sports competition manipulation. On this issue of tackling illegal betting, we carry out different activities. We run two main committees, one in which really it's around the sports betting integrity, and the other one which is illegal lotteries and betting committee. So which both develops tools and resources that help members, our lotteries member, to maintain territoriality integrity.
I think Luca may have frozen. Please just give him a minute if his connection improves. Luca, if you can hear us, I think your video feed is frozen. no, I think we've lost Luca in mid-sentence there.
Hmm.
Let's just pause for a moment, but perhaps we can take, Luca's, I think, going to try and reestablish his connection. While we wait for Luca to come back on, perhaps we can just move to one of the questions. I'd like to, I'll take the first one because it sort of relates to what we've been talking about through Luca as well. From Lucy Wynn, what are the most effective ways to detect illegal betting? And I thought rather than one of the panelists, we'll skip across to another one of the council members if we could. So James Porteous, who's head of research. James, quite briefly, because we've been doing this for a long time now, and I think you'll know the answers. What are the most effective ways to combat illegal betting?
Well, I think the question was, how do you detect illegal betting, which is a very simple question for a very complicated answer, because I think, first of all, you have to set the boundaries, like what is illegal betting where you are and in your region? What does the law say? And are you trying to detect illegal betting from customers or operators? Are you talking about operators which might be licensed offshore but not in your jurisdiction, or completely unlicensed? And how do you identify them, and how are you going to take them down? So how do you detect illegal betting is a very simple question, but a very complicated answer. And I think you sort of need to know the parameters of your own jurisdiction, your own organization, and essentially what you're trying to achieve. Does your organization have power to take action? Probably not, unless you're a law enforcement body. If so, do you have relationships with people who can take action, like law enforcement bodies or internet regulators or similar? So it's not an easy answer, I'm afraid, and I think it goes back to what I think what our message at the ARF Council, and I think the WLA, and I think Interpol as well, is it requires widespread global collaboration between these multiple stakeholders in law enforcement, in the licensed and regulated betting industry, in sports integrity, in internet regulators, gambling regulators, to share this type of information, to share typologies like Claudia was now, and like what is seen during SOGA. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying it. It's a very complicated question, and essentially collaboration and engagement is the first step, I think.
That summary at the end was very, very short and sweet, James, for a complicated question. Thank you very much. I think you're right. It's complicated, but indicated by how long we've been writing and talking about this, which is quite a few years before this group was formed in 2017. So clearly it has a great deal of impact. Unfortunately, we've lost Luca again. So whilst we wait for him again to come back on, if you don't mind, we'll keep going with the questions. And I think the next one is from Antoinette Price. So it's probably a follow-up from Lucy's question. And the question is, given the scale of illegal betting operations and the ease with which they can be set up, what can global stakeholders fighting it expect to achieve realistically? And I think Doug Robinson, Deputy Chair of the Council, who has been working on this with me together for a great many years. Doug, that's probably a good follow-up from James's answer as well. So perhaps you can just answer that before we go back to Luca. Luca, we're waiting for you to come back on and stabilize your collection, but we'll just let Doug go ahead and answer that question first then.
Great, thanks, Martin. Yeah, I mean, a very good question. What can be feasibly done? I think, as has been mentioned on this webinar, illegal betting, it is a huge, growing global issue. I think in answer to that question, quite a lot can be done, which is good, positive news for all of us and obviously our audience as well. And the way that the council have perhaps approached this is basically that there's three ways of doing things to combat illegal betting and the related issues, and that is obviously the first thing is to take action yourself, right? What does that mean? There's a multitude of actions that can be taken, whether it's from writing to actively engaging with people that perhaps are offering products in a jurisdiction without the consent of the regulator or the operator, to explain to them the situation. That can have an impact. Obviously, as James alluded to, sort of detecting and identifying such operations, organizing. A lot of them are obviously online, organizing for action to be taken against those operators. So that direct action that can be taken, and it does yield results. Not all the time, but it certainly can yield significant results on occasion. The second one is enabling other enablers, or talking to other enablers. A prime example of such enablers being financial institutions. So talking to individuals or institutions such as banks, updating them of the issues, the problems, the criminality or illegality that is taking place, and allowing them to take their own action as well. And last but not least, really coming off James's point, the stakeholder engagement, that wider engagement of the issues surrounding problems of illegal betting, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm going to echo a little bit what James said, which is that stakeholder engagement is key, not just for the those that you are working with in order to combat the problem, but also the wider public as well. And in terms of sort of actionable outcomes, I'd come back to Claudio, obviously, and what Claudio was mentioning before, which is, you can have impact. It does have impact, right? You look at SOGA over the years, the action and the operation itself has grown and grown constantly. As Claudio mentioned, to become a global operation, whereas perhaps in the past it was only focused in the Asia Pacific region. So just to give you an example of the outcomes there. So yeah, in summary, there are multiple strands of things that can be done in order to have impact, to have an outcome there, and they do work.
If you don't mind, Martin, I would
Please,
like to...
Luca, just glad to have you back.
My laptop decided to reboot twice in a row. I was really feeling like an illegal operator was hacking my laptop, so I don't know what is happening. I might need the help of Interpol on this. But anyhow, just to complete it on what Doug said, this is really what we do also at the WLA, both at ULIS, and really it's the importance of raising awareness of prevention, education. Really also we have a database where we collect all the information from a judicial perspective, what was happening in each jurisdiction in terms of illegal activities, to raise awareness, to make our members aware, to make our member pushing towards their regulator and governments as well to take action on this. This is of extreme importance, and there are several things that we do. We do as a ULIS, which is, as you said, an association which has bet monitoring services. So we do alerts, suspicious betting patterns to our members and sports organization, and then we complete also with the reports that are used by law enforcement agencies in court. But also from a WLA perspective, we do several activities, and we have several tools available for our members to understand the importance of this matter. But also we're working on something which we believe, and we have exchanged on this with the IRF Council, which we believe is extreme importance to really understanding the size of this market. Because we believe it is of extreme importance understanding and making regulators and governments aware of the size and the threat that this has to their in their communities, because this is of extreme importance for us, because only by knowing and being able to share those information, I think we will be able to effectively all together collectively fight against this threat for our industry and our communities and for our next generations.
Luca, you mentioned market sizing there. Actually, that's a very good segue into. We have a question from Professor Mike McNamee, who's one of the leaders of I think probably the best global sports ethics program through a collaborative group of universities. So Mike has asked, one question that bedevils other integrity threats is the issue of prevalence. Just what's the size of the problem? One challenge here is conceptual. Does everyone share the same definition? Which is a good point, as this is a global issue. Legal, how do jurisdictional differences alter the scaling of the problem? And methodology, how rigorous is the design of efforts to scale the problem with validity? For example, definitional jurisdictional issues and reliability. And you know, you and I have talked about this with Doug and James as well, because we've been looking for some years, all of us in different organizations, about how to scale this problem. And Doug and James have done some great work, especially in Hong Kong, to consistently scale the size of the illegal market. They've looked at illegal markets in other jurisdictions, but we're always a little hesitant to do that, because obviously it should be year-on-year data so that we can have a comparison between data. But I know you look at this from the World Lottery Association as well. So how do you see this question from Mike? Because you have a global set of members, so it's an important question for your members. How do you feel about the size of the market, and how do we scale that?
I think it's spot on. I mean, that's really the issue. And as I was saying, you know, understanding the scale, the size of the phenomenon can help combat the phenomenon itself. So I think about the methodology that we can use. There are several approaches, and you know, we discussed this. I think James and Doug can expand a little bit more on the way we can do this. We can have an empirical way of doing this, understanding, for instance, you know, the size of the legal market, which is what we know very well from a lottery and sports betting operator perspective. And based on the size of this, how they have evolved over the years or over the quarters of a year, understand how the illegal can go. We can have an analysis and involve players to understand what they do, where they play, which site they use. We can do an analysis of the network and understanding where the traffic is going. But also, I think, and then we can fundamentally use all those information to try to get a proper assessment of the sites. But also something we are investigating, it is the use of technology and artificial intelligence to help and support us in doing this. There is quite a nice work which has been done by one of our members, which is Singapore Pool. And they have started with this, creating their own algorithm in understanding they've used this in principle for a responsible gaming perspective. So avoiding players to get addicted to the game, so making sure that they're still able to propose an offer which is reasonable, but then they've expanded this in understanding what is the size of the legal market in their region. And that's quite a powerful tool that we are exploring and seeing how we can apply this in all the various jurisdictions and work with our members in the various jurisdictions. Because despite what we said before, that the definition is the same, the problem is not the same in each country. And we have different operators with different business model, different business activities in the various countries. So we really need the support also of all our members, so that locally we can have a proper estimate, a proper, I would say, implementation of this algorithm and the techniques that we discussed before, so that later on we can fundamentally collect all those information, aggregate those, and have a view at the World Lottery Association level, which can go down per, I would say, per region, and then at the end per country jurisdiction.
Claudia, thank you very much. I think we have more to talk about on that particular issue, but maybe just quickly from James as well, because James, you've done a lot of market sizing over the years on legal and illegal, and it's difficult enough to size legal markets sometimes. Could you say something about what you've done and the importance of methodology in answer to Mike's question?
Yeah, sure. So I think in answer to Mike's question, he hits, and I think Luca also hit on the key issues where you need a clear definition of what is legal and illegal. You need a standardized methodology and so on. And that is extremely difficult to do in a globalized online marketplace with 200 different definitions of legal betting or etc. I think with Doug and I, with our day jobs at the Hong Kong Jockey Club, we do have we are very confident in our Hong Kong market sizing, which we've been doing for several years, because we do have a clear definition of what is illegal betting and what is legal betting. And we do have a standardized methodology that we've run for several years, incorporating survey data, data analysis, other points that we triangulate, such as web traffic analysis, and so on. So, with our day job hats on in Hong Kong, we are very confident about that figure and that methodology. But as you maybe alluded to, as we look at other jurisdictions where we're not on the ground and looking at it day to day, and we're not maybe so familiar with the definitions, and we haven't run a standardized methodology, it becomes harder and harder as you go maybe further out from your home base. So I think Luca's point about trying to implement maybe an algorithmic model and a unified perspective across multiple jurisdictions really is essential. But it's also, I think, a very difficult and a long-term piece of work, I think, and again will require collaboration between many organizations.
Yeah. Thanks, James and Luca, for that. We could have another webinar, I think, just on the scale of the market, and there's some interesting work being done that I think we're going to do in the future as well. Perhaps as we're coming up to the end, I'd like to give a little bit more time back to John and Claudio, if we could. And I think there's a segue here from this issue of what's the size of the illegal market, back around to where we started with organized crime, and the funding mechanism that illegal betting and illegal gambling is for organized crime. So John, perhaps we could start with you, just some quick thoughts on that, and before we go on to Claudio. How do you see that in your study of organized crime, especially in Asia? Is this a funding mechanism, and to what extent?
Well, it's difficult to get figures, particularly in countries like the Mekong region, which are poor, weak governments, highly corrupt. So you virtually, the estimates that I've seen on the money laundering side are fairly ropey. We don't really know that much about how much money is laundered within the Mekong, how much is laundered, in the broader Southeast Asia, how much is laundered when you get to the destination markets. We know the price of drugs rises astronomically as you get to, Australia, I think, is one of the highest for methamphetamines. So when the drug is sold in Australia, they're making a lot of money compared to if the drug is sold in Southeast Asia. But even still, when you look at the scale of these countries, the GDPs are quite small. Laos, Cambodia, are very small countries. That's why I think it's important, as I mentioned before, about Thailand, that here you're talking about a middle-range country, good-sized population. Vietnam as well is one I didn't mention. 100 million people, rapidly growing economically. It's already on an illegal drug corridor. So you've got much larger scales there of importance. So I wouldn't hazard a guess on the actual scale of the sums of money that are being bet in the illegal online betting markets, but certainly they're quite substantial. Just do some basic sums on the scale of the illegal drugs being produced in Myanmar in the factories, and you're dealing with massive amounts. And every time the UNODC comes out with new figures, they're bigger and bigger. So, we're talking about big operations, and particularly for China, but also for the Southeast Asian countries. This is scary stuff. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you, John. And Claudio, as we're coming to the end, but we'd like to give you a bit more time. We can run over, don't worry. So just take your time. Really interested to hear your views on this issue of revenue scale and funding further illegality.
I want to just mention one point that to highlight what I think about this. We are living in time of crisis. We are living time of wars, pandemics, and things like that. All these crises do not stop criminals to just exploit what is available. And I want to recall here part of the content that been exposed also by Professor John, and which is also matching with a recent resolution issued by Interpol. A lot of people are currently trafficked to then be employed in fraud cyber-enabled systems to full fraud schemes. So I'm thinking about a call center, for example, or global call center or big call center. I think everyone here on the panel and or on the call have received or continue to receive calls in this way. So if you just think about this, who is making this call? Who is behind these schemes? And how these people are brought or forced to work on this kind of fraud and cyber-enabled frauds. And if you see at the latest resolution issued by Interpol on this and the exploitation of people that are trafficked, human trafficking behind the fraud schemes and the cyber-enabled fraud schemes, this gives you the idea how money are generated and through which means in time of crisis more than before. And I want to also recall here another recent resolution that has been issued at the head of National Central Bureau of Interpol, just ended in Singapore this week. The call from Interpol side to enable and enforce the responses of whole global networks. Of course, Interpol is the leader in this for what concerns the law enforcement, because reunite 195 countries law enforcement altogether. But global networks are everywhere. IRF is a global network, full of expertise, full of views. We need to enforce and enable all these views to come together to provide a response to everything which we detect.
Thank you very much, Claudio. That was perfect closing remarks, I think. It really summed up the answer to the question and the reason we're here. So I think we'll just close there, if you don't mind. We do have a few other questions, so my apologies to the questioners, but we want to try and not run over too much because people have other meetings, or actually quite late for John in Australia as well. He deserves a nighttime drink, a nightcap. So perhaps if I can close here and just thank the panelists. Firstly, John Langdale, Claudio and Luca. Thank you very much, not only for taking part in the panel, but also for your recent articles in the ARF Bulletin, which for the audience, if you haven't read them, please go to the Asian Racing Federation website and look at the bulletin. They're great articles, and I think all three of the panelists are thought leaders in what they do. Also thanks to Doug Robinson, Deputy Chair, for taking the time, James Porteous, Research Head, for taking the time. And we'll be back with more webinars in the future. We have a couple of great reports coming up soon, so I hope you can take the time to read them and give us your feedback. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye.